Okay, we should be good to go. You guys can go ahead and introduce yourselves, and then I will just send this or move the screen on once you guys let me know.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Jamie, for inviting us. I'm Deidre Flanagan. I'm a general surgeon and I'm the trauma medical director at Moab Regional Hospital. I have been here for coming up on about 2 years now. Um, and we certainly appreciate the opportunity to talk with you about this. I'm going to let Tammy and Jared introduce themselves and give them a chance to give their background because they're actually the stars of the day for this because they're the pros. So Tammy.
Thank you. My name is Tammy Tucker, and I've been canyoneering for about 22 years now, since about 2002. I was introduced to the sport by my younger brother. He was actually taking a college course and introduced me, and I thought, this is a crazy sport. This is scary. And then my husband and I started going out briefly on our own, and we realized we knew just enough to be kind of dangerous. So we started searching for an instructor, a really credible program, and we found Jared Hillhouse almost 15 years ago. And he did all of our training. He's been my mentor for almost 15 years. And I'm currently working for the University of Utah, the college part of it, for Bruce Shapiro. He runs the program up there, and I'm currently helping him with classes. And it's just a great sport to be in. So that's my background. I also work with Dr. Flanagan. I'm a registered nurse here in her clinic.
And Jared, please join us.
Good morning. My name is Jared. As Tammy said, I am an instructor and guide with canyoneering. I've been doing this for a couple of decades. My wife and I started Northwash Outfitters back in 2005 after I'd been guiding for a little bit. And we've been teaching and training canyoneers ever since. My full-time profession is a police officer with Blanding City Police Department. I've been an EMT, and I've worked with search and rescue. So I've got a little bit of experience on every sort of little aspect of this. So I'm excited to be here.
So I thought I'd first start out by just giving you a couple of episodes that we've actually had in this calendar year here in the Moab area, like just right outside of town. These were interestingly actually both at the same canyon, which is a super popular local canyon. It's considered to be a great beginner canyon. A lot of the guides take their groups there, and so it's maybe unsurprising that it's a place where things can happen. But I thought I'd start by presenting a couple of cases we've had recently, and then turn it over to Tammy and Jared to give you guys the meat and potatoes. So this picture you see here, there's a 57-year-old woman. She was visiting her daughter in Moab, and they were tandem rappelling. And if there are those of you who don't know, Tammy and Jared can tell you a little bit about what that is. But as they were descending on the second of four rappels on that canyon, her hair got stuck in her rappel device, and ended up causing her, unfortunately, a scalping injury. She had a really large chunk of hair and scalp all the way down to the skull that came off and was pulled off there. And so that required, obviously, that was a not insignificant injury and horribly painful for her, as you can imagine. And she got great care from the group that she was with, and they were able to contact EMS and search and rescue, but she required extrication, and you can see actually that it was a late day call. And so that's search and rescue having packaged her up and lowering her down off the final rappel to the road so that she could be brought to the hospital. But it was challenging because of nighttime conditions to have to be able to get to her and get her out of there. She was fortunately otherwise completely stable. She was actually evaluated and discharged from the ED and was able to follow up with a plastic surgeon on her return home to the area where she lived. But that was kind of an unusual injury. And then if you can advance the slide, please. The second one that we had, and you'll notice if you pay attention, you'll see that that's actually the bottom of the same rappel. And this was a 17-year-old boy who was vacationing with his family, and they were participating in a guided trip. And he actually had a fall from the top to the bottom of the final rappel, which was about 40 feet. Had some back pain. Fortunately, his extrication was easier because he was already at the bottom of the final rappel, which is out by the road. But search and rescue and EMS did attend him, and he was brought to our local hospital here. He actually had an L1 burst fracture, but fortunately no neurologic problems with that and no other injuries, which is pretty remarkable for that kind of a fall. He was really a lucky kid. That could have turned out very differently. He ended up being transferred to the to Timpanogos by Classic. Timpanogos is a ped center, and ultimately, fortunately, he didn't require any kind of surgical intervention. He was seen by the trauma service and the spine service, and he ended up just needing a TLSO brace and was able to be discharged to home to do follow-up. They're completely neurologically intact. But anyway, a couple of completely different kinds of injuries in different circumstances that you can see. All sorts of stuff can happen. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Tammy and Jared to kind of tell you guys what you need to know about canyoneering. And then also, I think we have some little questions, sort of test your baseline knowledge kind of things that Tammy put together. So we'll try and scatter those in there. And I don't know, maybe you can just tell Jamie when you want those and she can throw them in. So I'm going to sit back and let these guys take over.
Jared, go ahead. I'll let you begin.
All right. Thanks, Tammy. Kind of,
You want me to go to the next slide, or are you just gonna go for it?
I'll just go for it. So, kind of a description of canyoneering. That's what I want to start out with. For those that aren't familiar with it, a lot of people, when they think of canyoneering, they think of rock climbing. We use a lot of similar equipment in that aspect. Harnesses, helmets, rappel devices, ropes, that kind of stuff. But the difference with canyoneering, or one of the main differences, is that we're not just going straight up a wall and coming, either hiking back down off the wall or rappelling down. We're actually hiking around to the top of a slot canyon, and we will rappel down into the canyon. Once we are in the canyon, we retrieve our ropes and continue on down the canyon. So once we're in a canyon, we're kind of stuck in there until we complete the canyon, get out and get to the bottom. Or sometimes there is an exit route somewhere halfway in between, or a place that we can escape. But for the most part, we're rappelling down into the canyon, and we have to complete the canyon to finish it and get out. Once we pull our ropes at the top, we're stuck in there. So as Dr. Flanagan mentioned with that first injury, that first incident that she talked about, they were at the bottom of one of the rappels in the middle of the canyon. And so search and rescue was required at that point to package the patient and continue traversing down the canyon with the patient to get to the bottom and get them out. Whereas she mentioned this last patient was a lot easier to extricate because they were already at the bottom of the last rappel, which ironically in this canyon is pretty much right at the road, which is nice. So, and as a search and rescue member from past, those are a lot easier to deal with when you can get them right into the ambulance. So canyoneering is a combination of a lot of different sports that way, as far as the rock climbing, the equipment. There are potential for swimming in the canyons. A lot of these canyons hold water, which can be hypothermic. So we oftentimes will pack wetsuits, in the canyon. And that can be a little bit cumbersome. If the water is not as cold as you expected and you're wearing a wetsuit, that could lead to incidences of heat exposure as well in the desert. So that's something else to be considered. But canyoneering is a fun sport. It's been a blast. And I don't know if there's any questions exactly on what canyoneering is, or if we open that up yet, or I'll let Tammy move on with that.
Jared, I know you and I have talked a lot about this, but what draws you to canyoneering and some of the, I say, obstacles and the problem solving?
Oh, problem solving is one of the huge fun aspects for me. Trying to decide how you're going to get down this drops. A lot of the canyons have what we call natural anchors. So we're rappelling off of trees or boulders in the canyons. Other ones have bolted anchors, but that's not very common. If you get into some of the national parks, Arches, Zions, Capitol Reef, those kind of areas, you look and see a lot more of the bolted stuff. But in areas where they're a little bit more remote, we're rappelling off of natural anchors. So that's one of the fun aspects, is the problem solving, building the anchors, making sure they're safe. Other aspects is the potholes. Uh, a pothole is basically a big divot in the canyon that's been scoured out by the water and erosion, and it just holds water. And so some of them that I've been in have been 45 feet deep. So those are a little bit of a challenge to get out. A lot of different techniques to use, partner assists and rope throws and hooks and so forth. So yeah, the challenging aspects of the canyon really draw me to it. How I originally got into canyoneering was I'd moved to the area, so I'm currently living in Blanding, Utah. For those of you that are familiar with that area, we're about an hour and 15 minutes south of Moab. And when I moved to this area 25 years ago, I thought, I'm close to Moab. I'm going to get into this rock climbing thing. I'd been doing a little bit of gym climbing, and when I did a lot more research and looking into rock climbing, I ended up coming across this word canyoneering and started researching that, and decided that I like the aspect of the canyons a lot better than I did the rock climbing. And so I never really did get into rock climbing. But the beauty, the gorgeous canyons, I don't know if we'll have some of those pictures in here throughout the slideshow for that. But the canyons are absolutely gorgeous. I love being in there, and the way the light shines off the walls. So just different aspects of that I think have drawn both Tammy and I into some of these areas.
Ready to go?
Yeah, that's great. Okay. Yeah, if you want to go to the next slide, Jamie, I'll kind of start us off. And I would like this to be kind of a discussion. So
Yeah, before I put that out, I'm going to launch this
feel
first
free
question.
to jump in if the audience has any questions.
There we go.
I want to
Let's
put
see
out
what
this
people
first poll
think.
to see what people think before we go to the know before you go slide.
Okay.
I know Jared just kind of gave some of them away, but we'll, we'll throw that out there.
Okay, so what basic equipment do you need for canyoneering? Is the question.
Yeah.
And I think that bottom was supposed to say gloves, but it says gloves. So just read between the lines.
It's that whole type fast problem that I have.
Okay. Should we move on while they're doing that?
And they'll like, there's almost
Okay.
almost answering. We'll let him do that. Now there we go.
Move this over there, yeah. Fantastic.
People did pretty good with that answer.
Did really good.
Yeah.
It's excellent. So those
Yeah.
5 things are just very minimal, basic equipment. Of course, if you are more experienced, you have these tools, you're going to want to add things to that as you go along. When I first started canyoneering, my husband used to buy me all this really cool toys, as I call them. And I said, well, if I don't know how to use this, why am I going to carry this in the canyon? And so when you're starting out, you just need some basic things. And then as you gain a skill set with that knowledge, then you can add to those things. So that is just very basic list.
Yeah, and Tammy will probably get to this, but it's interesting that I noticed that only about 3/4 of the people that answered felt like the gloves might be a basic piece of equipment. And if it wasn't something that you did, I can see how you might not think you would need those, but she'll tell you more about that.
Yeah.
All right, so we can close that one out maybe.
Yeah, I think everybody should just close it. I stopped sharing.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
We can do, there we go.
All
Okay.
right. So, know before you go. I cannot stress enough that canyoneering is a very high risk. Okay, it's right up there with cliff jumping and river rafting. It is a high risk sport. So make sure you know what you're getting into. Make sure you get proper training. This is not a sport where you grab a rope and a harness and head down a canyon. People do that, yes. And we get a lot of those SAR calls on those. And so this is a very fun sport, but it does require a skill set. So get some training. One of the questions I popped up is where can you get training? Everything's online nowadays as far as resources. So, but if you go to American Canyoneering Association, there are multiple places around the state and even worldwide, but around the state, there is good ACA training programs. Jared is just one of many. Of course, I'm partial because he does a great job and he trained me. So, so get some training, please, before you go. And then you develop that skill set. Canyoneering is not something that you learn overnight. It takes years and it takes a lot of practice to do it safely. Okay. So with that said, know where you're going. Okay. Do your research. There's some great resources online now. Ones that I use, and these are just a few, is Road Trip Ryan, Climb Utah, Blue Gnome, Rope Wiki. Any others, Jared, that you use?
No, I think that covers most of the basics. Yeah.
So yeah, get online. There's lots and lots of information out there. There are, old-fashioned maps, but the really cool thing about the Road Trip Ryan and some of these others like Onyx, Backcountry, they have the beta is there. There's maps there. So there's a lot of stuff online, but just, if you've heard of this awesome canyon, maybe Leprechaun and North Wash, do your research before you go and know where you're going. So using Leprechaun as an example, it's out in North Wash, which is a half-hour south of Hanksville, Utah. It's very remote out there. We have seen rescues take place in canyons out there several times, but know what you're going into. What are services available? The closest resources to North Wash is Hanksville, Utah, which is very limited. There's a grocery store, a gas station, get basic things. But in the scenario that you are needing to be rescued, where's that rescue going to come from? How long is it going to take them to get to you? And in the North Wash area, we have seen it hours. There's one particular incident that sticks out in my mind is we were out there already. It's been a couple of years ago, and some people were stuck in a canyon, and they came out of the canyon. The one guy did. We started to get help around 10, I think it was 10 o'clock at night, and helicopters, RESSAR showed up about 2 a.m. And then they airlifted with the helicopter the last victim out of that canyon at 6 a.m. So that's, a typical scenario in these very remote areas. So know what your resources are. And you have to go into these canyons knowing that if something happens, it's going to be hours and hours sometimes. Sometimes you might have to end up spending the night in a canyon while rescue is coming. So do your research. The other thing that is really important to consider is your weather. Okay, it's a huge factor for canyoneers. I can't tell you how many canyons I've canceled because the weather just wasn't ideal. I have a saying, the canyon will always be there. Always go with a plan B. Sometimes it's plan C. Several years ago, Jared and I and friends, we descended down into the black hole. And it's a very popular summertime canyon because it's full of water. And you do not go in there if it's been raining within about 3 days, which it had not. And we in our group, Jared and I in our group, we climbed down to the bottom. And when you get to the bottom of its White Canyon, there was water running. Unbeknownst to us, that's a huge drainage and the water was running. And we backed out. We said, nope, that's a dangerous situation. We went and did another really small canyon down the road. You just have to be willing to say, I'm not going to put my life and my friends' lives in danger. No matter what, we got to do this canyon. That's not the mindset.
And
Yeah, go
maybe
ahead.
take a minute and explain if maybe people don't understand what the drainage concept is.
Mhm.
Like it doesn't have to be raining where you are, kind of a thing.
Yeah, exactly. So you might be in a drainage as the black hole in White Canyon that has a drainage of like 50 miles around. And it has multiple drainages coming into that main canyon. So we didn't know it was raining somewhere within the last 3 days. And we didn't know where it was. It could have been 50 miles an hour away, but because there was water running in that. So I don't know if that explained it good enough, but you've got your canyon and sometimes you'll have a lot of drainages going into that canyon. Some canyons don't have a big drainage. And so you have to kind of look at the contours and see it when it starts to rain, where's that water going to go? The majority. If it's going to go towards the canyon that you're going into, you don't want to be in that area, in that particular canyon. So yeah, the canyons will always be there another day. And it is heartbreaking. I went clear to Zion's last year to do a big canyon. And we got up that morning and there was a 20% chance. And it's a big canyon that you just don't go in if it's raining. And so we went and did 3 other canyons that day. And yeah, it is disappointing. It says, let's say there's a question, how deep can the water get and how fast does it run? That's a good question. It all depends. You'll hear us say that. How fast your storm is going, how much your storm is going to drop on you. It can be, oh gosh, in the canyons, 20 feet deep. I've been in a canyon recently that we looked up and there was this huge tree and that was a good 30 feet up there where that water had deposited that tree up there.
And
so
particularly I think in the slot canyons, which are, you know, narrower with the higher walls as compared to something that might be a little wider and there's maybe rocks you can scramble up on the side. We had an incident, I think it was last year, I can't remember, but it was a woman on a canyon that's out the river road here by Moab. She was hiking with her dog and, you know, one of the freak desert storms came up, and both she and her dog got caught in a flash flood in the canyon, and got washed, I think, over a mile, both of them. They fortunately were both fine. They were not injured, and they were able to be rescued. And she had some, I think, some river training. So she kind of knew, oh, I'm in fast moving water. Here's what I need to do, how I need to position myself, so forth. But that was a fluky storm. You know, she hadn't really made a bad choice. She just had bad luck. And so if you're ever hiking anywhere around anything with water in it, it's always, to me, it's always really interesting to kind of look up and see if I can tell where the high water was the last time. And, you know, and all the branches will be folded over and the trees will be down on, and sometimes it is just frighteningly high up there.
Yeah.
So you know that's where the water goes.
Yeah. And didn't she lose her shoes in that?
I think
That was
so.
one of the reasons she had to be rescued, because her shoes had come off and she didn't have a way to hike out with any shoes. So that would be very.
What's your plan if you find yourself in a canyon and it rains unexpectedly?
That's a great question. The whole time that we are descending down a canyon, particularly a canyon that I'm not familiar with, I'm looking up and I'm looking for possible ways to get out. Okay. So if you know, even though I'm not expecting rain that day, I'm in the canyon, I'm still looking, going, yeah, I could scramble up that maybe 50 feet or maybe 100 feet, whatever. I could get up that side canyon if a flood came. So I'm continually kind of looking around each turn and corner as I go down canyon. And then if something surprises me and I'm like, oh, just back 100 feet, I remember seeing that, I can scramble back up there. But it is one of the risks for sure. Something else I wanted to just kind of touch on really quick is that checking your weather multiple times before. Like before I leave Moab, I'm checking it. When I get to Hanksville, I'm checking it. As I get to the top of the canyon, I'm checking it. Early this spring, I was out with friends and we were descending down a canyon, and to the north of us was this huge front moving in off of the Henry Mountains, and weather forecast was like 10% rain. And just before we dropped in, I pulled out my inReach. I'm like, I'm going to check this one more time, and it still said 0%. So we went, and it was just ended up being really high clouds, blew over some wind. But be checking your resources multiple times before you drop in. Okay. Moving on, I just can't stress enough too that canyoneering is a team sport. Don't go alone. Always tell somebody where you're going and what time to expect you back. Jared and I both carry Garmin inReach, which is a satellite beacon that we can communicate if we need to with each other, and of course call out SAR to come and get us if we need. There's a great example, you guys all I'm sure have heard, the 147 hours. I always say the what not to do. That guy broke all the rules, and it didn't turn out so good to him. He didn't tell anybody where he was going. He was all alone. He didn't let anybody know about what time he'd be back. And so, yeah, Aaron Ralston lost his arm because of those decisions. So that's a good example of what not to do. So don't go alone. It's a lot funner too. You know, I will admit I have done a small canyon by myself, and it wasn't really fun because who are you going to share that with? The beauty and the fun, and it's the camaraderie. That's why it's a team sport. I touched on basically the satellite beacons. There's inReach, Spot, Delirium. There's a lot of them coming out and stuff, but the main thing is that you can get information out to SAR, EMS, if you need help. And so I highly recommend those.
The other thing that, and I don't have one, so I'm going to speak from a place of ignorance, but I believe that the most updated iPhones have satellite capacity in them. And so that, and I don't know how well it works compared to an inReach, but my understanding is it works pretty good. So if you have like the most recent iPhones, you may already have that available in your phone.
Yeah, Dr. Flanagan, there was a recent search and rescue call, within the past year, that somebody used an iPhone inside of a canyon for calling emergency help, just with the new updates they have. So it is possible.
Yeah, so they're great. I'd highly recommend those. Next point I wanted to make is dress. Proper gear, proper dressing. Now, when you're in these canyons, you're going to be not only rappelling, but doing something we call chimneying, stemming. You're using your arms and your legs, and a lot of times you're just sliding down over the rocks, and they can be rough. Your clothes just get destroyed. Yeah, don't don't wear your $80 new jeans in the canyons because they just get shredded. We wear knee pads, elbow pads to protect our elbows and knees, of course, our skin, but you want a pretty bad road rash can make your trip through the canyon pretty miserable. So we always wear long sleeves, long pants, closed toe shoes. I can't stress those enough. And then the other thing I wanted to mention too is a lot of times you'll find poisonous plants in these canyons, poison ivy, poison, oh gosh, what's the other one?
Oak.
Mm-hmm. Poison oak.
My first hike in a canyon when we moved in Moab, I got poison ivy. So my bad for wearing shorts.
Yeah, we see people out there in their Tiva sandals, and oh boy, that would be really, uncomfortable to have a terrible scrape, or have a rock fall on your foot, so we're covered. And also I do that for sun protection too. Grown up in the desert my whole life, I'm trying to protect myself from the sun. So the other consideration is we kind of talked about the gear. Everyone should have a harness, a rappel device, a helmet, carabiners, and gloves. The reason I put gloves on there, is it absolutely necessary? No, but I have seen people grab the rope inappropriately, slide down, 50, 100 feet, and just take all the skin off their hands. So in my groups, we wear gloves. If I'm leading a canyon, I require everyone to have gloves on. And so that's really important. I'm going to talk about a helmet too. You see people out there all the time rappelling without helmets, and they're like, well, I'm fine, I'm not going to hit my head. It's not so much about hitting your head as you're rappelling as a rock falling. There was a young lady in the Salt Lake area, I think it's been 2 years now. A rock hit her and killed her as she was going down a falling rock. Or if I'm down below belaying a safety and Jared's coming down the rope and he knocks off a rock, that comes down, and it doesn't take very big rock to really hurt you and cause an injury and a brain injury, and nobody wants that. Everybody in your group should know how to self-rescue. Okay, that is a skill set that everybody in your group should know. If they don't know and they're being guided, then your lead should absolutely know how to rescue and assist others. Okay, if I'm going out with somebody I've never met before or don't know, a friend of a friend or something, I ask a lot of questions. What's your training? How long have you been doing this? If I get in trouble going down, if I get my hair stuck, can you help me? Do you know how to do this? So it's really important to ask a lot of questions and know how to rescue yourself. Okay.
And maybe talk a little bit more about what you mean by self-rescue in terms of, is it like if you get stuck somewhere on the rope, or is it if you hurt yourself, how are you going to get out? Or maybe a little more about what you mean by that.
Yeah. So if I'm going down a rope and I get stuck, okay, if I've got my hair in the rappel device, one of the easiest ways to always mitigate problems like this is just to have my buddy up on top. I'm like, I'll holler at Jared, I've caught my hair. One of the easiest things that he can do is just to lower me down to the bottom. Okay. Rescue is always easier from the top and easily done. I get down, I unhook my hair from my device, and it's super easy. Or if he doesn't know how to lower me, then what do I have that I can step up, take the weight off of that, my caught hair, and then continue down the rope. Okay, so that means adding some more equipment onto the rope where I can transfer my weight onto something else and then solve my problem, whether it's my hair caught, my shirt caught, I've got a knot in the rope that I need to get past, and then go on down. So,
or you run out of rope. Maybe your beta was wrong and the rappel is longer than you thought it was, and suddenly you're at the end of your rope, but you're not at the bottom.
And there's 30 feet left. there's an example for every situation that's been happened. This has been probably 10 years ago. There was a young lady that came to Moab, and she and her friend met a person, a casual acquaintance, and they wanted to go canyoneering. And he said, "Oh, I'll take you canyoneering." And they went through one of the popular canyon routes here. He threw down the rope, put her on it. She went down the rope, and it was 30 feet short. She didn't know what to do. He had not rigged a contingency, is what we call, to lower her, and she just went off the end of the rope and pretty much shattered every bone in her body, including her pelvis to her feet. That was a long, all day, all night extraditing her out, and she, to date, I know, has had like 15 surgeries. That changed her life forever, and she was in her early 20s. So that's kind of what I mean by self-rescue. You know, if she would have known what to do, she could have went back up, ascended up the rope. If her partner who took her out had rigged things correctly, he could have lowered her. So there's a lot of ways that we can mitigate possible, life-threatening injuries. Yeah, so the next one on my list, oh, there's some questions. Sorry, I didn't mean to be ignoring.
Jared fortunately has been answering most of those, I think, that we're talking.
I got you covered on the chat there.
Cool.
Yeah, great.
Thank you, Jared.
Thanks.
Yeah, that's great. So continuing on is my next one is, I'm going to skip down to, if you have a medical condition, even among friends that you think you know everything about your friends, speak up and talk about, maybe I'm exercise-induced asthma. Maybe you didn't know that about me. And so I'm going to say, "Hey, Deidre, I've got asthma. So if I really start huffing and puffing or having a problem, I want you to know." Or I'm diabetic, and my insulin's in my pack right at the top. So if I tell you I need insulin, you're going to grab that for me, whatever the situation is. Let especially the leader of your group know. There's always a leader in a canyon, okay? Whether it's casual friends or a guided tour or very experienced pro guides like Jared. So there's always going to be a leader. Let them know, let your friends know. And then the last thing I put on there was take a first aid kit. Depending on how many's in your group and your experience as a medical provider, but you can have a really complicated first aid kit or a very basic. I carry a very basic because I try and think, okay, what are some of the issues I've seen? I mentioned the blisters on the hands, scraped knees, scraped elbows, very basic things, a Band-Aid will do, or throw some, bacitracin on it, or something very simple. Wrap it up. To worst case scenario is a fall, a serious fall, maybe a broken leg, maybe a neck injury. Those are some really serious ones. So what can you do to kind of mitigate those is the safety things that we've talked about. Knowing how to lower people, knowing how to ascend a rope if you need to. So next slide, if you want to go into, Jamie.
Yep, and I am going to do your other questions while we're going into the next slide, because you do have a term on the top that you guys have said, but some of us might not even know what it means. So hold on one second. I'm going to go and launch this one, because you have in there research canyon beta, but what is canyon beta? I'm letting people short answer this and type in what you think it is going to be while we go to the next slide, because I think this will be very interesting.
Cool. And then I think we ought to let Jared answer that.
Yeah, once you guys get in there, we'll go to the next slide, but then Jared can actually explain to you guys what it is. And I left Ruth's name on this. So it's Ruth, this is actually your poll I'm saying on there.
I'm going to move that a little bit so we can see your slide.
Yeah.
Yep. And as soon as I get some answers, I'll share what people have said.
Okay. You want me to continue or let Jared go ahead?
Go ahead and I don't want, yeah, go ahead and continue just because we're getting a little bit short on time. And I
Okay.
want to get started on this. And then as soon as we've got some more answers, I'll let you get through a few and then we'll pause to see what people have said about this.
Okay,
And
just
I-
interrupt me.
Yeah, and I saw that somebody had a question about what's in a personal first aid kit. Tammy's got a bunch of great slides about that, so we're definitely going to get that one answered.
We'll get that one
Yes.
next. Okay, so Jamie asked me to talk about some stabilization. What do you do in the event of an injury? And I'm going to go back to the team sport. Ideally, having a team of 4 to 6 is ideal. Now, do I go in a canyon with less than that? Sometimes I do. But ideally, at least 4 members on your team. And this is why, because if somebody gets injured, you want to have the appropriate amount of people to have the best outcome for this rescue. So say we're in a canyon, Deidre just fell. She's not too terribly injured, but she is injured. We need to, first thing we do is need to go call for help. Okay. I'm going to send 2 members to go for help if I have enough people. I want 2 to go because they can help each other. Maybe there's a few obstacles to get out. Hopefully they're going to keep on track. They're not going to get lost, and they're going to get out with the beacon and activate that. Now, if you're in a wide canyon with, wide open sky, you can activate that beacon right where you're at. But if it's not convenient or not able to get that signal out, then you've got to send people for that. So that's the first thing I'm going to do. And then I'm going to start talking to Deidre and see how she's doing. Your medically trained people should stay with the patient. Okay. I'm going to do a head to toe assessment. EMS is all familiar with that. I'm going to get a medical history on them. Is she allergic to anything? Maybe she's just broken her arm and she would really like some Tylenol or ibuprofen, something similar like that. Depending on the injury, we have to make a decision whether we stay put or am I able to put a sling on her arm and she's cognitively intact, everything, and we can assist her getting out. It's going to depend on, do I have 1 or 2 rappels? Do I have 10 rappels? Can she rappel? If it's a leg injury or an ankle, maybe we just need to help her hobble along and get her on the rope, and then she can go down on her own. So it's really dependent on the injury. I'm going to give her first aid, of course. If she's bleeding, I carry stop bleed in my pack, also like compression. Okay. If she's in shock, we're not going to move her at all, right? You're going to treat for that shock. You're going to keep her warm and dry, and it can be really challenging or cool. If it's 100 degrees out, if it's not a neck or back injury, I'm going to try and get her in some shade. I'm going to try and keep her cool. Okay. So it just all depends on that. Depending on the injury, I also put on there, keep her hydrated. Now, if this is a severe injury where obviously a bone sticking out, possibly she could go to surgery, I'm not going to keep pushing water down her. Okay. But if it's going to be 6 hours and she's stable, I'm going to go ahead and give her a little bit of water. Okay. So there again, it really depends on the injury and the circumstances, the weather, all those things. You just have to use your best guess, your assessment skills. Maintaining water or a body temperature is going to be super important, especially if you're in a wet canyon. If there's a wetsuit on her, you might have to get her out of that wetsuit, but you may have to keep her warm also. I'll go through these as quickly as I can. The other thing is you might be there for hours. So maintaining communication with SAR and EMS, if you can, through your beacon, that is going to be really helpful. It's going to be helpful to SAR and EMS. so that they know what they're coming to. Oh, this is just a person that can't walk anymore, but they're totally stable. Okay. Or maybe this patient condition is changing, and that's going to be really important to communicate that with them. Always stay calm, of course, and reassure the patient that help is on the way. We're going to get you out of here. You know, we're going to get you the treatment that you need. I think that's important. And then things that you can kind of tell the patient as they're like, if I'm doing a guide trip and this is, you know, somebody that's totally foreign to the climate, the area and everything, I just kind of talk them through, you know, there might be a helicopter coming, there's going to be SAR, they're going to put you in this bed, this litter thing, they'll, you know, get you out by the helicopter, or they may have to walk you out. Just kind of prepare them what to expect. And then when they get to the hospital, you know, kind of walk them through that. You're going to be seeing a doctor, you're going to have x-rays, you're going to have CT, whatever's needed to take really good care of you. Okay, so I just let them know that. And then when SAR and EMS arrive, be able to tell them about your patient. You know, this is a 57-year-old woman. She's got diabetes or asthma. She's on these and this and this and this medication, and try and be of help to them, and so that they can quicken her recovery or his.
Want to take a quick look at your pictures of your first aid stuff?
Yeah.
You got about 5 minutes, it
Okay,
looks like.
sure. Do we need to answer that question?
I don't know if you guys can actually see the results from that.
We don't see the answers, but I bet you can
Yeah.
sum them.
I can. I did see the details on here, so I will read them really quickly. So there's just a couple different answers: gear, a trial canyon. Honestly, I don't know. Estimate of what is needed for the climb, like rope based on outside info, help for information to overcome obstacles particular to that specific canyon. Canyon lengths, types of problems, obstacles. Again, information about the route, number of rappels, length. Again, I don't know. Planned movements. GPS or mapping. Those were your answers.
That was pretty good.
That's good. Yeah. You want to touch on that, Jared, real quick, and then we'll go back to the first aid kit.
Yeah, some of those answers were spot on. Pretty much when we refer to canyon beta, I don't know where the term came from. It's kind of a weird one in my opinion too, but it refers to basically talking about the canyon route. It's the information. When we talk about canyon beta, we're referring to the information that gives us an idea of what we're getting into. The length of canyon, the amount of rappels, the kind of equipment we're going to need to bring, that kind of stuff, the time of, the length of the canyon, so how long it'll take us. So, and along with that beta information, there's also what we call the canyon rating system, which talks about whether it's a technical canyon, meaning it requires ropes, whether there's water in the canyon, meaning we're going to be swimming or would want to pack a wetsuit, and then the length of time it takes, whether it's 2-hour canyon or a multi-day canyon. So all that information is kind of summed up together in the Canyon Beta, wherever we get it from, online or in guidebooks or something that way.
Great. All right. And I just want to add to Jared's, it is very subjective. So you just have to know that when you're reading beta and they say it takes you 8 hours to get to that canyon, that may be an ideal situation. That might be a mega athlete, you know. So they're kind of an average, but just know that they're very suggestive, and conditions will change. You may have a class A canyon and then it's raining and it turns into flowing water, and now you got a class C. So just know that they are very suggestive. Okay, quick run through really quick on your first aid kits. As you can see, I put keep it simple. You're not going to do surgery out in the field. You're not going to do anything major. You're just stabilizing until help can arrive. So I have these 3 waterproof pouches. You can see the gray one and then the 2 with the yellow. And I kind of divided those up a little bit. So if I just need a Band-Aid, I grab the one with the Band-Aids. I have ACE wraps, splints, gloves, alcohol wipes, and bacitracin. For my medication one, I have an eye wash, some burn stop bleed, basic instruments like tweezers and things like that. Safety pins are really helpful. Sometimes your tape is dirty or it doesn't work as good, so I'll safety pin some things. The eye wash is really helpful because you get things in your eyes and you don't want a corneal scratch. Nail clippers, they may not be life-saving, but when you've got a big nail taken out, a chunk of your nail, it's really inconvenient. It can hurt. So I put nail clippers, zip
Which
tie.
happens about every trip too.
Yeah. Zip tie. So I put zip ties in there. I use them for a variety of things too. Everything from helping patch my pack to, you know, things that I could use it for.
My favorite thing on there that I wouldn't always think about is the limodal, because God forbid you get halfway through an all-day canyon and something you ate last night or whatever catches up with you. So I think that's one that I think people don't think about and are really grateful when they have.
Right. And the free, excuse me. We're not building fires in the canyon, so it's not for fires, but for that rope burns, it feels really good on those rope burns. That can happen. Yeah. So next slide, that's the medication. My bandages are really simple too, a variety sizes of Band-Aids, ACE wrap, compression dressing, alcohol wipes, Mastisol, bacitracin again, a splint, a SAM splint. If you've never used a SAM splint, there's YouTube videos like crazy that can teach you how to use it, but you can see mine has been well used and loved. Some gloves again, because you still want to be safe. You want to protect yourself against blood-borne pathogens. Coban is one of the best things ever invented, and some tape, of course.
And I saw that Jared put in the chat that duct tape is an amazing tool that is useful for so many things.
Yeah, that's a good one. Good one. Survival kit. So that's a little bit separate. And it's if my thought process is if I need to spend an extended amount of time in a canyon unexpectedly. Fire kit starter, very important. And I have waterproof matches also, because sometimes lighters don't work, as we know. A headlamp with extra batteries or 2 headlamps is really important. Paracord, you know, there's so many uses for paracord. Hand warmers. After 22 years of canyoneering, last winter, me and a friend spent the night in a canyon, unplanned. It was in March and the day was a little short. We couldn't find the route out and we decided to just hunker down and spend the night, and we were just fine. A bandana has so many uses. In the heat, I wring it out in water, put it around my neck. You can use it for part of a dressing if you need to, multiple. I've put it around my face because we've been out and the winds have been so bad, blowing sand in our faces. Chapsticks for me is a life-saving thing because it is very uncomfortable to have dry chap lips. Leukotape, I use that instead of moleskin. I find it more effective. A bivy, that's the one that you really want to have with you, a bivy. For an injury, you know, you might need it to cover a patient, keep them warm, multiple uses for that. And then of course, extra food. I've got extra food in there if I need to. I always plan for my day snacks and then a little more just in case I needed to spend. The night my friend and I spent in the canyon, we had enough food, we had enough water, so always take extra of those basic things. And then, as I said before, keep it small. This is mine. Those 3 packages go into this waterproof. And it's really hard to find something besides a dry bag to keep everything. I've had my first aid kit ruined several times by getting it wet. So I'm double bagging everything now. And as you can see, it's my hand, that's my hand, and that's how small I keep it. So
I think that's probably our stuff that we have. If Jared, you've got anything to wrap it up, or if there are any other questions anybody wants to throw out, I think we're pretty much at the end of time. And if not, thank you so much for having us. We appreciate the opportunity.
yeah. Any last minute questions?
You got to give it that awkward 8 seconds, right? Before you process, let them. Yes, I second that. Thank you everybody for joining us. Like I said, I will be sending you guys all some questions. I have one that I didn't launch here that I'll send you guys in the post presentation questionnaire to get your continuing education. And hopefully that all gets to you guys. It should be there by get to you guys tomorrow. And like I said, we're going to jump off and head to our podcast session. And so hopefully you guys, sending via email, Mariana. So, and then hopefully you guys can listen to our podcast once we're done. It'll just be a lot more casual conversation about this. So thanks everybody for joining us today. Thank you, Dr. Flanagan and Tammy and Jared. And I will see you guys momentarily in the next portion.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.